Okay, let's dive into this. We are going to break down the final 2 hours and 40 minutes in the life of the Titanic. It's an incredible story of celebrated engineering meeting, well, catastrophic failure. How the most luxurious, unsinkable ship in the world ended up at the bottom of the Atlantic in less than 3 hours. For the survivors, this was the sound that haunted their nightmares. Just try to imagine it. The grandest ship ever built, a 46,000-ton marvel of engineering, literally tearing itself in two in the absolute silence of the freezing North Atlantic. It wasn't some kind of explosion. It was the groan of a giant dying. So that's the big question, right? How did this happen? Well, to really understand that final horrible moment, you have to look at the very thing that was supposed to make the Titanic invincible. Because as it turns out, the seeds of its own destruction were built right into its design.
Right. So the Titanic's whole claim to being unsinkable, it pretty much rested on one major piece of engineering, its watertight compartments. This was the absolute state-of-the-art safety feature of the time.
The idea was actually pretty brilliant. If the hull gets punctured, you just seal off the damaged areas, contain the water, and the ship stays afloat. On paper, it was designed to survive even with its first 4 compartments completely full of water.
You know, the easiest way to picture it is to think of the bottom of the ship like an ice cube tray. You can spill water into 1 or 2 of the little cubes, and the walls keep it from getting into the others. Simple, effective, it really should have worked. But, and this is a huge but, there was a critical, fatal flaw. And here it is. This is the crucial mistake. The walls of that ice cube tray just weren't tall enough. They stopped well below the main deck. Now, why would they do that? Honestly, to make room for the huge, open, grand ballrooms and public spaces for the first-class passengers. It was literally a design choice for luxury that created a deadly weakness. Because if the ship tipped forward enough, water could just spill over the top of one wall into the next and the next, a catastrophic domino effect. And this is exactly where the theory crashed into reality. The iceberg didn't just punch a hole, it scraped along the side of the hull, slicing open not 4, but 6 of those forward compartments. At that moment, it was just simple math. The ship was taking on too much water, the spillover was going to happen, and the Titanic's fate was sealed.
So let's actually walk through that timeline. Let's see how that one design flaw sealed the ship's fate over those 160 minutes. Because you have to remember, this wasn't some sudden plunge. It was a slow, methodical sinking that was just driven by pure physics. So, the impact happens at 11:40 p.m. The clock starts ticking, but look how long this actually takes. Just 20 minutes later, at midnight, the captain knows the ship is doomed. But it's another 2 hours and 20 minutes before she finally goes under. This was a slow, agonizing, and completely unstoppable progression towards disaster. This part is just staggering to me. 10 minutes. That's it. Within just 10 minutes of hitting the iceberg, with water pouring in, the ship's own designers who were on board did the quick calculations. They knew. The math told them everything. The flooding was too much. The spillover was inevitable. The ship was going to sink. So as each one of those forward compartments filled up and then spilled over into the one behind it, the bow of the ship was just being dragged deeper and deeper and deeper into the ocean. Every single ton of that freezing Atlantic water was pulling the front down, which in turn was lifting the stern up. And that's what set the stage for the final terrifying. And that brings us right back to that final frantic moment we started with, the breakup. This wasn't some kind of Hollywood explosion. No, it was a catastrophic failure of physics. The ship was being forced into a position it was never, ever built to withstand. This quote from an eyewitness just perfectly captures the incredible forces at work here. At this point, you have to stop thinking of the Titanic as a ship. It's become a massive, unbalanced lever. The bow is full of thousands of tons of water, acting like a giant anchor, while the stern, still full of air, is being lifted right out of the sea. So let's just break it down. You have the plunge, pulling the bow down. You have the lift, raising the stern way up into the air. And then you get the stress. The middle of the ship, its backbone, the keel, was being bent with a force it just couldn't handle. Something had to give. And right there, between the third and fourth funnels, the steel snapped.
So after all that horror, what's the legacy? Well, the disaster, born from those 160 minutes of chaos and that one fatal design flaw, completely changed maritime safety forever.
The loss of life was just beyond comprehension, but the lessons that came out of it were powerful.
I mean, look at these changes. Every single one is a direct response to a failure on the Titanic, the International Ice Patrol to track icebergs, enough lifeboats for every single person on board, which is just shocking they didn't have that before. Much stricter rules for building ships, and a mandated 24-hour radio watch so a distress call is never ever missed again. This is the legacy written in the loss of over 1,500 people. And that kind of leaves us with this one final thought. The tragedy wasn't just about an iceberg. It was about arrogance. It was about believing that you've built something that's infallible. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are our modern unsinkable marvels? What do we believe is too big or too advanced or too safe to fail today? Maybe the greatest danger, then and now, isn't what we're afraid of, but what we have absolute faith in.